G'day, I'm Sean and welcome to the CarExpert Podcast. We have a massive show for you today. It involves Jade Credentino. Hi, Jade.
Hello, Sean.
Learning to drive a manual car. It's finally happening, so stick around till later on the episode to see that happen. And Scott, you were there to teach her.
Yeah, fresh back from the chiropractor.
Are you okay?
I am, yeah.
Gotten over it?
It's incredible. Insurance companies will sort most of it for you these days, which is,
impressive. Very impressive. We've got a few other things we're going to talk to you about today. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the future of car fuels, I guess. I don't want to give away too much, but stick around. Yeah, renewable energies in cars. But we're going to just dive straight in. Jade has a little announcement that's separate to her learning to drive a manual that she wants to talk about. So Jade, take it away.
I am so excited for this. So this has been something that's been in the works for the last few weeks. Guys, mark your calendars. The 14th of October down here in Melbourne, we're going to have a showcase of the cars that are going to be coming to Australia towards the end of 2023 and early 2024. The whole team, except for Sean, is going to be there. But we are so excited. All the details are going to be on social media, so you can find that at carexpert.com.au. I'll also get Sean to put the details in the description of the podcast episode.
Wow, Jade, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What cars will be there?
So at this stage, we've got probably about 11 or, close to cars. We've got the Ineos Grenadier, the Hyundai Ioniq 6 EV, which I know is not new, but it's going to be on display with V2L capability. So if you guys haven't seen that before, that is very exciting. The new Ford F-150, the electric Ford Mustang Mach-E, the CX-60 and CX-90 from Mazda, the Nissan Patrol Warrior, which I am probably most excited about, the BMW i5, the Porsche Cayenne, the new facelifted model, and the BYD Dolphin. So we've got quite a lot of cars that are going to be there. I'm super excited. Definitely. It is going to be a ticketed event and for limited availability. So make sure that you guys head to all of the social media channels and find out all the information from there.
So Jade, I'm curious a little bit, this has been your brainchild. So where did this idea come from?
I think it was just something that you guys, before my time, kind of did the Experience Centre down in Sydney. I was somebody who actually visited it. I think it was really awesome.
Did you visit the Experience Centre?
I did, but it was in like
day.
its last days.
Okay.
And I didn't recognise who was there.
They all bailed out by that. They showed up for the opening and did a photo op and then they left again. Yeah.
I'm going to go on the record and say I spent a lot of nights at the Manly Warringah Travelodge.
Oh yeah.
And then we were locked down in Melbourne. We couldn't go back to Sydney. So that's probably why we went there.
Yeah, that's exactly. It was during, we had just opened up, I think, for lockdown. So yeah, I think it was really cool. I think the idea and the premise of it was really good, especially like I mentioned, being a female walking into a car dealership or something like that is quite overwhelming, especially having that sales pitch right on you. So this event will be for everybody to come and have a look and no, obviously, hard sales pitch on there. There's going to be some exciting stuff there as well, which I can't release just yet, but make sure that you are following all of our social channels and we'll slowly release that.
This is something we used to do at Car Advice.
Yeah.
Paul was the one who organised a lot of this stuff initially, but it was really cool as well to meet people face to face because there are regular commenters who you just know as a username. Yeah. Who you actually get to chat to. The CarExpert team will be there, so if you've got any burning questions for us or you want to abuse us about something, please feel free to do it in person.
Yeah, I think
if you can't make it, Scott's home address is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. James Wong is the ambassador for Drive Against Depression, and we've done quite a few of those drives this year, and it's always really cool meeting the CarExpert fans and the CarExpert people that actually follow what we do. So I'm super excited to meet all of you guys. We've given you guys enough notice. It's going to be about a month's notice. So again, the date is the 14th of October, 2023. So
if you're going to forget it, it's the same date as the referendum.
Yes.
That is correct. So make sure you either vote in the morning or vote straight after. Voting will be open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I have done my research.
This podcast is sponsored by the Australian Electoral Commission.
Australian Electoral Commission.
Yep. So we've counted all that in. I'm super excited. I think it's going to be hopefully one of many to come in the future. So if you can't make this one, let us know what cars you maybe want to see in the future. future. And comment down below which car you're most excited to see.
So yes, if you're in Melbourne, or if you're not in Melbourne and you can make it down here for it, well, worth coming along. There is parking at the event, so
and there's also a hotel in the same complex. So if you're from out of Melbourne and you want to make a weekend of it,
so no excuse not to come along. So yes, do head to the CarExpert website, and we'll have all the details there. We'll also put a link in the show notes for today. All right, let's move on. Now that we've gotten Jade's little plug out of the way.
You say a little plug. Huge effort in the background to put together a big event. Don't you sell this short?
I am very excited. So.
Yes, I can't wait to see how it turns out. So even though I won't be there.
I'm so sad. Next
to hear about how it turns out.
Yes, I'm very excited to hear how it turns out. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of things posted from it. But yeah, we'll probably talk about it more as more things come to light over the coming weeks as well. All right, I want to move on to an interesting thing that came out of IAA Mobility, or the Munich Motor Show, which is what we spoke about last week. Hydrogen seems to be making a little bit of a comeback, doesn't it, Scott?
It does. It was sort of pitched as the fuel of the future for quite a while there. I remember watching old Top Gears, and James May was driving the Honda Insight in California with a little glowing green orb in the dashboard. But it's been put on the back burner by car makers because it's expensive to develop, and all of a sudden we have these really strict emissions targets, and the best way to meet them is electric cars right now. I think the reason it's come back into sight is brands like BMW and Toyota are investing really heavily in it. BMW is now bringing more iX5s to Australia. The Toyota Mirai we're going to get more of in 2024. And Jade, was it the Hyundai Nexo was already on government fleets?
Yeah, that's right. So it is currently on government fleet, and I have been chatting to a few government bodies as well, and they're also considering it. So it's very exciting to see more hydrogen come through.
Well, just to give people a quick history lesson here, what is it that made sort of hydrogen come and go? Because it's huge in the space race. NASA uses it to launch their rockets into space, but from a car perspective, why? Like, what's the difficulty with it? Why'd they go away from it?
So there's a couple of challenges with it. One of which is the fact that we don't have any infrastructure. The reason that petrol engine cars or diesel engine cars are really easy is because within the range of a fuel tank, there is usually a petrol station to fill up, and that's the promise of hydrogen. But that promise only works if the fuel stations actually exist, and the fuel stations only come about if there's enough cars on the road, and you end up in this really tricky chicken or egg situation.
Where you don't have a chicken or an egg, really.
Yeah, exactly. You have the idea of both. Yeah. Whereas with electric cars, although the infrastructure is not incredible, you can charge those cars at home as well. Yeah. And that solves that problem to an extent. The other challenge with hydrogen is, for one, the PR disaster that was the Hindenburg.
Don't know anything about it. No, never heard of that.
But it's quite difficult to transport and store. So petrol, although you still need reinforced tanks that aren't going to blow up into a million pieces in a crash, they don't need to be heavily pressurised and bulletproof like hydrogen tanks in cars are at the moment. And that means that there is a lot of investment car makers need to put into, for one, making their cars safe, but also to actually moving this fuel around.
And it's also hard to harvest hydrogen, isn't it? Even though it's the most abundant resource in the universe, it's actually very hard to get it, store it, and put it into a car.
Right. Well, one of the problems we have with electric cars is they're only as clean as the energy you put into them. And if the energy coming from the grid is dirty coal power, ultimately then they're still cleaner locally because there's no tailpipe emissions, but over the course of their life, they don't save the emissions they could relative to an internal combustion car. It's a similar story with hydrogen. There are ways to get it into tanks cleanly, but ultimately they are still fairly young technologies and they're quite expensive. It's the sort of thing the CSIRO is working on in Australia. You can also do it a dirty way, but doing it a dirty way and then putting it in a car designed to be clean doesn't make all that much sense.
Very counterproductive, yeah. Okay, so I know that BMW have the iX5 is going to come with limited numbers in hydrogen.
Yeah, there are 3 of them coming to Australia.
But they're the biggest hydrogen car that will be available in Australia, right? Yeah, so I think it's cool.
Yeah, so as we said, Hyundai launched the Nexo here in the midst of COVID. So, which, you know, I went in a Nexo, really cool. It feels like an electric car to drive around. Refueling it was really fascinating because I think it was 3 minutes, and it fully refueled the 6 or 8 litre tank that it had. So it was actually a really impressive thing. And they built that car out of mostly recycled materials. So credit to Hyundai for that one. BMW bringing 3 iX5s, but I know Ineos, which the Ineos Grenadier is a very, very cool Land Rover-ish off-roader, but they've got a hydrogen version that they're working on, right?
Yeah, so Ineos is committed to developing a hydrogen version of the Grenadier, or one of their off-roaders. We know they've got more cars coming as well. And that is one of the spaces where hydrogen really does have potential. Ultimately, it kind of makes sense to have an electric car if what you do mostly is drive it around the city, because you don't need to carry around these hydrogen tanks. You can charge it at home. It's when you go into more remote places or you want to carry something really heavy on the back, like on a truck, for example, that hydrogen kind of makes a bit more sense and offers more options. And we're even seeing some brands talk about the idea of a fuel cell plug-in hybrid, for example, where you get 100 k's range from the battery and you've got the hydrogen fuel cell to extend your range further. Okay. I'm really curious, Jade. We are nerds, Sean and I. We love this tech. You are less of a nerd. Yeah. Is there anything about hydrogen that scares you or worries you?
Look, I think it's definitely behind electric in the sense of its reach in Australia and how many people actually know about it and know fundamentally how it works. So I think with what Toyota and BMW are doing, it's in the right direction. I'd love to see a lot more education around it and actually a lot more everyday people or businesses who have large fleets actually kind of take it up. I think it's exciting. I just really hope the government can get behind it.
Other question for you is, I think of hydrogen and I just think of Hindenburg explosion and really high pressure.
I thought we weren't going to mention that, Scott.
Yes, there's a hydrogen PR first. No, there's not really. Is that something that ever crossed your mind when we started talking about hydrogen? And does the idea of filling up at really high pressure worry you, or is that just an us thing?
Look, I think, again, I'm not too all over that hydrogen PR disaster. So I think
it was a while ago, to be fair.
It was in black and white.
Yes.
I have the blessing of ignorance. I think if it's done right, I think there does need to be some sort of training around it and needs to be used in controlled situations at first. I don't think you can bring a whole lot of hydrogen cars here and expect the public just to completely adopt them. So that would probably be my only concern. I know more about electric cars and I know more about the safety concerns around those as well. So I think they're equally hand in hand have just as many concerns than the other. Yeah.
I suppose I'm curious for both of you here. Theoretically, hydrogen cars would be a cleaner carbon car overall, from the building of the car to the fuel. Theoretically, right? Hang on, because you don't have to mine all the precious metals that you do for a battery. So I'm curious, and I'll start with you, Jade. Would that affect your buying decision, or do you not care?
It's not that I don't care because I don't care about the environment. I think it's no, because I've got places to be and people to see, and that's what it comes down to. I think a lot of people, when they look at what they can get for their money, how convenient it's going to be in their everyday life, those factors will probably play a more important role than the environmental factors that come into it. I mean, people are still buying V8s, people are still buying and importing, massive American utes that have a lot of tailpipe emissions. So
there's a hybrid one, to be fair. So
to answer your question, I don't think people will have too much of a concern around the environmental factors, and that's mostly because a lot of people don't actually know what it means.
So you think you care more about your individual footprint that you're creating whilst using the car, rather than what may or may not have happened to make the car to get to you?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yeah.
What about you, Scott?
I think convenience is king, and it always will be. Ultimately, the reason people buy cars, although there are people out there who buy big electric cars to make a statement, they buy them because they take them from home to work and to school and on holidays and all those things. And that's why we love cars as well, right? They're freedom in your pocket in the form of keys. So as much as I love the idea of the hydrogen footprint being cleaner potentially, and again, it depends on how you source the hydrogen, how the power is being sourced to build the car and to charge it and all that sort of thing. Ultimately, I'm with Jade. If an electric car better suits my needs, or there's an option to have an electric car and then a fun petrol weekend car, I think that fills my needs in the same way that maybe a hydrogen car would, and based on current pricing, it'll do it for less.
So I guess the future is murky in terms of the fuel we might use, because Porsche are working on an e-fuel to keep their old 911s running.
It's really, really cool tech. They take hydrogen, they capture carbon from the atmosphere, they use renewable energy to power the process, and they come out with this petrol that can run in current petrol engines and actually has fewer bad byproducts than organic petrol. It's a really interesting idea, and although it might be expensive, it might be what lets us enjoy fun petrol cars for a long time into the future.
So you're saying that our 930 turbo on the wall could still keep working for the next 100 years?
We're not going to make a widow of the widowmaker.
Okay, well, that is some good news because I'd like to keep my XRA running for a few more years.
I want a 911 GT3. That's for me.
That's all right. Well, please like and subscribe so one day Scott can afford a 911 GT3. And if it goes really well, you might get the RS. You never know.
I want a manual. Besides the point, we're getting sidetracked.
Beside the point. So, there's a lot of this tech going on. It does make a lot of sense for an industry standpoint, as you said. I think there's also no reason why we can't have both because we have petrol and we have diesel, and there was a while there where we had leaded fuel as well. But we've moved on from that, thankfully.
LPG.
Yes, but speaking of moving on, we should keep this ball rolling. Leave us a comment. Let us know. Would you prefer a battery electric vehicle, a hydrogen vehicle, or stick to good old ICE engines? Leave us a comment. Let us know. And if you are looking at purchasing a new EV, there are a lot of options, and it can be hard to find a really good deal. But we have a solution for you.
That's a great segue. That's a great little.
We do have a solution, and it's really simple. You head to Google and type in "Help Me Car Expert," and that'll land you on a page with many pictures of Paul, who can help guide you through the purchasing process from finding a really good deal to connecting to a dealer and making sure that you get that good deal and you don't get stiffed at the end of the whole road there, which is, I guess, one of the things that can happen quite easily. But thankfully, the CarExpert Dealer Network is here to help you out. So head to Google, type in "Help Me Car Expert," and if you do buy a car through Help Me Car Expert, leave a comment, let us know. What did you buy and how was the process? We'd love to know. All right, Jade, it's time. We're doing it. The other day, we went out and Scott, I sat in the back seat, it was not much help. But Scott decided to teach you how to drive manual. Now, don't give away too much because everyone's going to get to see how it went, but you were nervous going into it?
Yeah, mostly because of it had been a little while since I had done it. And when I say done it, it was in a car park in a 2004 Hilux. So it's very different to what I'm going to be driving when I'm learning manual. And look, I think the first bit went well. I'm just frustrated at how the second bit went.
Well, don't give away too much.
But I'm optimistic.
Yeah, all right, well, here it is. This is how Jade went learning to drive a manual car. Jade, time for you to learn how to drive a manual car. You excited? What are you wearing?
Worried for you. You left your safety kit at home.
Mate,
no one has ever been hurt wearing a high-vis vest.
I can't argue with that
I'm going to clip my helmet up as well.
I shouldn't have. Okay, well, I've got your seat so far back that should keep me safe. You ready, Jade?
Yes.
All right, Scott, take the lesson away.
Let's start the car clutch and brake. And we're on.
Good start.
Do me a favour and turn off start stop using the button to the right of the steering wheel.
Yep.
I'm going to mute the radio as well. Perfect. Okay, so take the park brake off. Now, remember when you're changing gears, the clutch is on the floor, which it is at the moment.
Yep.
All right, first gear. Now we're on a flat surface. You can let go of that. We're on a flat surface here, so you should be able to step off the brake and the car won't roll.
Yep.
So to start with, no accelerator, and just bear in mind that wall's in front of us there, so you're going to need to steer a little bit and just really slowly come off the clutch until you feel the car start to sort of groan a little bit. Awesome. All right, that's your take-up point. So just hold it there for the second. Yeah, really good. And now off the clutch completely. Off it all the way. Awesome.
We're off to the races.
That's
How good is this?
Start. That's awesome. Well done.
I'm so scared.
Well, we've done well. We've got first gear down.
All right, so we're going to try for second. Once we've gone around this corner, maybe. Keep it in first for the moment.
Yeah, hug the apex.
Yeah,
Slow in, fast out. There you go.
Awesome. So when you're changing gears, it's clutch to the floor, off the accelerator, and then you want to gently feed, so clutch to the floor, second gear. Awesome. Now, gently off the clutch through that point and feed the accelerator back in.
Oh,
right, that's okay. So the reason that happened is you just came a little bit too quickly off the clutch.
Yeah, I did kind of feel that clunky.
So you just want to go slowly through it, and it's easier when you got more speed as well. That's really good.
what do we reckon? Time to hit the open road?
I think it's time to hit the road, Russell Cleat. So, yeah, leave it in second, and it'll go almost all the way down to standstill, and you can either accelerate away, or if there is something coming, just clutch in and stop, and you put it back in first and start again.
It is worth mentioning, with a manual, one of the good things you can do is actually use the gears to brake. You don't need to use the brake every time you come up to something like this.
We just haven't gone fast enough yet for that to be a problem.
So Jade, it is worth keeping in mind that as you pick up speed, if you're slowing down for a speed bump, you can just come off the throttle and the engine braking will do a lot of the work for you.
And so again, you can see third gear happily goes down to low speed.
Yeah.
Now coming up to here, what do you need to do?
Pull the clutch in
Yep.
and brake.
Clutch in. All right, so with the clutch in, you can just use you don't need to worry about the gears. Just leave the clutch in, roll to a stop with the brake, put the car in neutral. There's no rush, there's nothing behind us. Nice and easy. That's so good. Well done. And I'll just indicate right up here and we'll just do a U rather than end up on the main freeway. Nice and easy, there's no rush, nothing behind us.
Oh!
All right, there it is. Clutch and brake to start the car again. All right, I didn't like this green anyway, we'll wait for the next one.
Hey, we made it a long way.
We made it a long way.
That's pretty solid effort there, Jade.
Okay, so what I did that time was what?
So you came off the clutch a little bit too quickly. If you want to come off it quickly, that's fine, but you need more accelerator.
Okay,
Or you gotta be
to
really
like
slow.
match it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're gonna get the green
Oh, we
one.
should be good here. All right, no rush, nice and slow off the clutch. Just take it nice and easy. Give it a bit of gas. Oh,
I did it again.
you're moving forward. All you need to think about is just getting the car. Here we go. First gear, slow, 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 slow.
Yeah.
Nice, there you go.
There we go.
Oh, we're going down a dead end straight. I thought you were going to do a U-turn. That's okay, leave it in first. Okay, Jade, clutch in, you're stopping. Clutch in, clutch in. Nice, okay. So first gear, that's first, all good. Nice and slow, he's miles away. There's absolutely
He's
no...
laughing at me.
No, he's not, he doesn't know. You're not in gear, So first, no rush, just slow, slow, slow. Awesome, well done.
Go. I'd just like to point out, I think the helmet may have been overkill, but you kind of nailed it, Jade.
Nicely done.
Well done. Scott, I think we should get some lunch and leave Jade to practice her.
Yeah,
manual
do you have the
drive.
keys to the automatic?
I do, yes. Yeah, let's
Let's go, baby.
All
All right,
right.
I'm out of here. See ya.
Good luck, Jade. Well, there you go. Scott, you've recovered from that experience?
There wasn't that much to recover from. I've taught a few people
He's
to
being
drive manual.
nice.
No, I'm not. Genuinely, you did a really, really good job. I know that sounds patronising, but I've taught a couple of people to drive manual, and that was one of the smoother experiences I've had.
Well, I think the car that we drove was great.
Yeah. So you've been it's been a little bit now since you learned to drive a manual. How are you feeling? You're getting a bit of a hang of it now?
Yeah, I think I still have that anxiety going on the road. I think I would love to go on the road late at night when I can not be surrounded by a lot of pedestrians walking and traffic moving and just kind of get into the rhythm of a traffic light stop and all that type of stuff. It's so much easier knowing how to drive a car and learning manual than I think learning manual and learning how to drive a car at the same time. So I think it's definitely not a dead thing yet. I've had a few people, message me on Instagram when I posted about it and they're like, oh, well, I know how to drive. Now I can just learn manual. And I was like, yes.
Yes, you can.
I'm not starting a revolution, but yes,
Well,
learn
this
manual.
wasn't a sports car. This was a Mazda SUV, right?
Which does have a lovely gear shift.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
it
know
was
that
great.
I know that this is a nerdy thing to talk about, but driving that car, it's got one of the slickest gear shifts in a normal passenger car on the market. It's just fun. I took the keys for a night. Jack's driven it for a night. Anyone who drives it comes back and goes, that is lovely.
Yeah.
There you go. One thing I did want to point out on that car, and I think it's fairly common, is that they essentially have an anti-stall system in them. And I know this, you fell foul of it a couple of times when we were stuck at the lights there. It would stall, you'd throw the clutch back in, which would start the engine again, but you hadn't realised, and by that point you'd press the start-stop button again.
It's actually an auto start-stop thing.
Yeah, so it's restarted the engine, but Jade hadn't realised, so she's
so-
turned the car off.
Hold
Yeah.
on. I think it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B. I think I pressed the the engine on once and that restarted the start stop.
Yeah, at which point it then got in the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that actually makes total sense.
So yes, I did. It's one of those things. The anti-stall in it is actually quite cool. It's quite a neat little I-stop or whatever they call it.
So what the car essentially does, and if anyone's driven a really old, not even a really old, a recent manual car, a lot of them don't do this, but as you start to come off the clutch, obviously the revs start to die. And in a car that doesn't do this, you've got to be really slow on the clutch if you don't want to use the accelerator or it'll stall. In this Mazda, and it was a system I think Ford potentially pioneered with the Focus RS. It was one of the first cars to do this. But as you come off the clutch, as the revs dip, the car just gives you a little bit more to keep it above idle and stop it stalling, which if you're in traffic, you're not feeling confident and you want to go slowly on the clutch,
that
makes
was where
it
I kept
so
getting
much easier.
stuck. Yeah.
Because you kept leaving your foot on the brake with coming off
Well,
the
no,
clutch.
it was more just that also happened. It was more just when I pulled my foot off the clutch in certain situations, I would have to pull it all the way off before I pushed the accelerator because I had enough revs, like I had enough power to give me that momentum. But when I was at that traffic light and I was stopped there for quite a significant amount of time, I forgot that I had to kind of give that extra push. So yeah, I quite enjoyed that car. I'm keen to go out and do it a little bit more. Would I go out by myself again? No.
You'll be fine.
Jade and I have got a driving test date booked in. It's
lovely.
We're going to sort it out.
Excellent. So I know a lot of people will comment and be like, oh, if you can't drive a manual, then you shouldn't be driving a car. But there are a lot of people that have never, ever driven a manual. And I think, Jade, I'd love for you to go straight down the barrel there. Ooh. Any tips you have for someone the first time, if they've been driving a car but have never driven a manual before and they're going to have a crack, any tips? Straight down the camera there, let them know.
This is really tricky. One tip, I asked so many social platforms this question and I kept getting different tips. One tip that I really enjoyed is wear flat shoes. Like right now, the shoes that I'm wearing, and I'll show you on this camera here, they have a bit of a heel, not a lot, but the shoes that I had were so flat that I could feel the clutch the whole way through, and it just made it so much more easier. Another thing that I personally recommend, don't overthink it. I think I went in there, the first bit in the car park, I kind of got my confidence up and I was ready to go, and then my ego really copped a beating when I couldn't get started at that traffic light. So I think just take it super easy. Find roads or car parks that you're familiar with as well, and that are not too busy to start with. And it's all about practice.
This is what it comes back to, right? The worst thing, as long as you're in an environment with a bit of space, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to stall the car. And that was one of the first things we did. I put Jade in the passenger seat and just stepped off the clutch and said, that's all that's going to happen. Yeah. There's nothing to be scared of. Yeah. Except for other cars, but that's a different story.
And look, this doesn't apply to people who've never driven a car, but if you have been driving a car for a few years already and you go to learn manual, just remember you already know how to drive a car.
That was the easiest part, was that like I have in the back of my mind subconsciously all the tools and all the skills that I need to drive the car. It's just physically putting the clutch into consideration when I'm doing everything else. So highly recommend if you're thinking about doing it, give it a crack. Yeah.
Yeah, and leave us a comment with your top tips for learning to drive a manual. We'd love to know what you think. So, all right, we'll move on. Congratulations, Jade.
Thank you. Haven't officially got my manual license yet. Need some more tips.
We'll print one off. We'll print one off for you after this. Okay, we do have a question from YouTube. A Mode 8761 wrote in and said, how many kilometres do run flats last? E.g., if you're driving from Sydney to Melbourne and you get a puncture and no tyre shops are open, do you call roadside or do you keep driving?
I have a really dumb thing to say.
Go on.
When I was about 12, and I would never forget this, and every time someone brings this question up, I remember. I thought the speed limits, when it says 80 kilometres on the wheel, I thought that was as far as you can drive.
Oh, right, the road ends in 80 kilometres.
No, that's as far as the tyre will go. After 80 kilometres, it's not...
on a spare wheel, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's not actually going to work. So.
In this case, you are absolutely bang on, because a lot of the literature around run flats, depending on how flat they're running, obviously if the thing's running on the rim, you can't drive anywhere, but if it's a slow leak or something like that, about 80 kilometres at 80 kilometres an hour is what some of the manufacturers say you can do. Although again, if the car starts making horrible metal noises, stop, call roadside, get help.
I think it's a very straightforward answer. So I think the thing is, if you're planning on doing a long trip and you have a car with run flat tyres, go to Bob Jane and just get a spare wheel. It's very much worth having just the spare in the boot, or at least a puncture repair kit.
Yes, most new cars, if they don't have a space saver or a spare, they will have a tyre puncture repair kit.
Having tried to use one of those though.
That was going to be my next thing. Learn how to use it. Learn how to use it before you go on a long trip, because you don't want to be struggling with that for hours.
I think if you're going off the beaten track, if you're going off the Hume or the Pacific Highway or one of those main routes, just get a spare wheel, because you never know what you're going to run into, where it's going to happen, or how far away the closest tyre shop is. So I think that's it. But in answer to your question, 80 for 80 is the general rule, or 50 for 50 if you're in America. So just to make that one clear. All right, guys, we're nearly at the end of this. We'll move on to our picks of the week. Jade, you've got a timely one, I think.
Very good.
Very well played. I didn't get it for a second, and then I did. Took me a while.
Yes. TikTok.
So this happened about a week ago now. So Carlos Carlos Sainz.
Yes.
I want to make sure I got that right in front
Carlos.
Carlos is a smooth operator.
So according to 7 News, I was reading the article about it. 3 people tried to steal his $500,000 watch off his wrist.
That's why I haven't bought one.
Yes, that's why.
Yes, exactly. Now, according to the news article, reportedly, Sainz first got Sainz. I need to get this right. First got in his car and then ditched the car and then ran on foot after this guy.
Following the typical Ferrari strategy.
Yes. It was a really interesting story. I think because we've spoken about it in the office a few times, the drive to survive success, and obviously all these people, it's really scary now, I think, for Formula One drivers, and that was something that kind of brings me back down to earth a little bit, and yeah.
And it's also the dumbest thief in the world because, to put this into context, this was on the Sunday after Carlos had placed 3rd on the podium in Italy for Ferrari.
Yeah.
And then he's still in Italy and someone tried to mug the Ferrari driver. Like, you've got to be the dumbest thief on the planet, right?
And the watches, the Richard Mille watches that they wear, some of them are one of one, but they're all incredibly limited. So if it pops up on eBay...
Oh, yeah, you're going to know.
You're not going to look and go, oh, someone's bought Carlos Sainz's watch. Obviously, it's been stolen.
Yes. So if you are a would-be watch thief, pick not a Formula One driver.
Just don't pick a new career. Yes. Don't go stealing watches.
Plot twist, it was actually Mattia Binotto because he's out of a job at the moment.
It's Ferrari severance, yes. Scott, what's your pick of the week?
I've also gone Ferrari, but I've gone old school. A video came up on Instagram recently of an Enzo being absolutely thrashed around a Croatian racetrack. I don't know who it is driving, but they are a very good driver.
Very good driver.
At one point, this Enzo is fully sideways in 4th gear and he has the foresight to take his hand off the wheel and put the number 4 up to show his passenger how fast they're going. It is so impressive.
Yeah, very cool. Well, my pick of the week is, if you haven't seen it already, Super Cheap Auto released their new best performing oils under the one roof. Very, very cool. Has some of Australia's top motor racing people in it, and they're drifting through a caravan park in Queensland somewhere, but they're all dressed up in old people's gear as if they're all retirees.
Right, grey nomads.
It's very, very cool. Really good stunts. Really cool to see these people. So definitely check that one out on, I think it's on YouTube and also Super Cheap Auto social. So well worth the watch, and some very cool car stunts in it. But I think that pretty much brings us to the end this week, guys. You got any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
If you're Carlos Sainz's watch thief, please reach out to us. Explain to us what you were doing. That's what I want to know.
Yes, write to us at I'm a watch thief at CarExpert. All right, guys, it's been a lot of fun this week. Next week, Jade, you're not going to be here, so we are going to have a special guest on the podcast, so make sure you tune in for that one. If you haven't already, subscribe, give us a like, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions, write to us, podcast@carexpert.com.au. We'd love to know any feedback you have or any questions you have, because we like to answer them on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Here. Guys, thanks for joining us, and thank all of you for joining us and tuning in.
Thank you for coming along with my manual journey.
We'll see you next week.